Every market is different. They have slight nuances, differences in the way that they do business. And that's the way it is here in Vancouver. If you're thinking of moving to Vancouver, you're not going to fully understand that. And I don't see anybody sharing this information. I've done this for 15 years. I've helped hundreds of families move here, and I've learned what's different about buying in Vancouver and what are the things that are important for you to know before you actually start making the decision to move here. So stay tuned. I'm going to share these things with you right now. So number one, the size of homes. A lot of people are shocked by just how small our homes are. And honestly, it's a factor of the cost of living here. But most housing styles close to the city of Vancouver are considerably smaller than you'll find in other parts of Canada, let alone North America. For instance, a typical house in Vancouver is around 2,100 square feet. You might find some that are 1,200 square feet and some that are maybe 2,500, 2,600, but that's really about where the square footage tops with houses. One bedrooms are typically around 600 square feet, two bedrooms typically around 800 square feet, and townhouses or duplexes are usually around 1,200 square feet. And all of that is just because our city is really confined, lots are relatively small, and then we have very strict building codes that restrict the size of the property. So be prepared when you come to Vancouver. It's likely that everything is going to be a little bit smaller, not to mention more expensive. Number two, only 21% of all properties that change hands in the city of Vancouver are detached homes. They're houses. Now that's incredibly different than anywhere else in North America, and especially in Canada. Now, you would kind of think, well, is that because it's just a big city? The example that we can use in Canada is Toronto, the biggest city in Canada. You would think if there's anywhere more urban that would be a place that had fewer house sales than Vancouver. But in fact, it has nearly double. In Toronto in 2022, there were 46% of homes that changed hands that were houses. The other example that I can use is Nova Scotia. In the province of Nova Scotia, 65% of all properties that change hands are detached homes. So it's very unusual that only 21% of all properties that are traded in a given year are houses. And that's the way that it is in Vancouver. Most people are not buying houses. Now, why is that? Well, we can point to all sorts of reasons, I think. One, just the cost. Not a lot of people can afford to buy a $1.5 million, $2 million, $3 million property. And I think we're also in a place where we're at the forefront of a condo lifestyle. It's not a purely financial decision to live in a condo anymore. It's a lifestyle. People choose to live that way, even though they might be able to afford a house. And then we're also just so confined geographically that there's just no land to build more houses. And because there's no more land, the cost of those houses is skyrocketing, and they're tearing them down in order to build higher density townhouses, condos, that type of thing. So a big difference for the city of Vancouver is very few houses change hands, only 20% of all sales. Number three, this is a big one and something that a lot of people have a hard time with, but 99% of the time in Vancouver, the listing agent is going to be present at the showing. So if you're buying a place, it's going to be me and you, plus the listing agent present at the showing. And that can make buyers who aren't used to that uncomfortable. You're going to feel like I can't really, open the cupboards, or I can't talk the way that I want to talk in front of them. And that's true to a certain extent. But one of the benefits of having the listing agent there is that they're the ones who are going to know that property better than anyone. And so it's nice to have somebody there that can answer any questions. So if you're looking at a condo, they're going to have at their fingertips, hopefully, the information about what's happening in that condominium at that point in time. Or just, like what's going on in the neighborhood. Is there a new building being built right in front? That type of thing. The listing agent is going to be able to answer those questions. And we're not going to have to wait for information to come later that day. So something to be aware of, something to kind of wrap your head around and be prepared for. And it changes the way that you behave at the listing appointment. And one thing that I point out to my clients is that you want to have a poker face. You don't want to give out too much information to the listing agent, right? So you show up and this is the perfect place for you. You don't jump up and down in excitement because they're going to know. And that might affect what it's like to negotiate when you actually make an offer. So important to keep in mind, the listing agent in Vancouver is going to be present 99% of the time at showings. Number 4 is that it takes time to arrange buyer's tours. In some markets, that setup can happen incredibly quickly. In our market, predominantly because, as I mentioned, the listing agent has to be present, we're coordinating one extra schedule, and the amount of time to do that is just a longer process. The other difference is that tenants are required to be given 24 hours notice. And so many properties are tenanted. And if there's, say, 10 places that we're looking at, that just adds complexity to the process. Another reason that it takes time is that we don't have a pending sale category in the MLS. And so if a property has an accepted offer, that's something that we'll only learn once I reach out to the agent to try and arrange a showing. And so there's a lot of just reshuffling and reorganizing that takes a longer period of time to set up buyer's tours. Number 5, 99% of all listings in the city of Vancouver are going to be on the MLS. So that's very different than many markets where there's a lot of for sale by owners. In Vancouver, that's an incredibly tiny part of the market. And I'm not exactly sure why that is. My theory is that our market tends to move much faster. The amount of money that is involved in these transactions is much greater. And so sellers see the value in hiring a real estate agent much more frequently than they do in markets where prices just don't move as quickly. If you purchased, as an example, a property in Regina, Saskatchewan for $220,000 20 years ago, and today it's worth $250,000, you might not see the value in paying out commissions to real estate agents. In Vancouver, where in that same period of time, a property that you purchased maybe for $200,000 20 years ago may now be worth $1.5 million, people are able to afford the professional help, but also see the value in having professionals involved. And so, like I said, very, very few listings are not going to be on the MLS. It's almost non-existent. And so you can rely on the MLS system, and you can rely, those listings are all shared on all of the cooperating realtors' websites. So there's no real difference in the listings that you'll see on Remax's website, on Royal LePage's website, on realtor.ca, or on my personal website. Those all share the exact same listings because they're all on the MLS. I'd love to know which one of these differences in our market is the most surprising to you. Comment down below which one has shocked you the most. Number 6, our market moves very, very fast, even in a slow market. And that's something that we've had, let's say, for the last year or so. But even in a slow market, the average sale is happening in about a month. When the market is hot, that gets down to maybe 5, 6, 7 days. And really what that means for you as a potential buyer is that you need to be prepared. You need to be reaching out to a professional agent, having them sort of help you understand what our market is like, getting all of your ducks in a row. Most importantly, being in touch with a mortgage broker and getting your finances in order. You want to be ready to hit the ground running and have your best chance for success, because our market can kind of feel, in comparison to many other parts of Canada and many other parts of North America, it can feel like getting on the Autobahn. I don't know if you've ever had that experience. I have. I like to drive, but man, when you're getting on that on-ramp, on the on-ramp onto the Autobahn, and you're picking up speed, and there are cars going 200 kilometers an hour, 250 kilometers an hour, even though you're going 100, 120, it feels like you're standing still. And that's the experience that many buyers can have in our market. And you need to be prepared for that. Number 7, here's another big one. If you're renting, tenants are not represented. So in other markets, if you're looking to rent a place to get into a lease, you can hire a realtor who will help place you in the lease, similar to the way that a buyer's agent would work when you're buying. Unfortunately, in BC, that category doesn't exist. So tenants are all on their own. There are property managers, but they represent the landlords. And so they will have sort of a pool of properties that they're handling. And if you call them, what they'll do is, yeah, sure, they'll help place you in one of the, let's say 100, 200 units that they represent. But what they won't do is go out and find you one of the thousands of properties that are currently being rented that are out there. And the reason for that is that there's no MLS cooperation. There's no commission that's being offered for that rental agent to help place you in a property. They're just not getting paid. And of course, therefore, nobody's doing that work because they would go broke. So it's a little tough if you're a potential tenant moving to Vancouver. Basically, you're on your own and you got to find properties by reaching out to those property managers, by looking on websites such as Kijiji, Craigslist, Facebook Marketplace. Those are the places to hit up. I don't make YouTube videos for a living, that's for sure. I sell real estate in Vancouver. And if you're thinking of moving to Vancouver, I'd love to hear from you. Reach out anyway. Contact details are right there for you. I've helped hundreds of people move to Vancouver over my 15-year career, and I got your back if you're thinking of moving to Vancouver too. All right, so number 8, what's different about buying a house in Vancouver? One thing that's important to know is that there's actually no subdivisions in Vancouver. The last land was developed in the 70s. It's a very small city. If you've seen some of my other videos, you'll know the area, the land mass of the city of Vancouver is just 110 square kilometers. And so that area was totally developed in the 70s. Today, if you're building a new house, if you're a developer, what you do is you buy an old house, tear it down, and then build a new house. Now, of course, that changes a bit when you're looking at the suburbs, areas like Langley and Surrey. There is land for new subdivisions in those areas. But the closer you are to the city of Vancouver, the less likely that's happening. So areas like West Vancouver, North Vancouver, Burnaby, Richmond, and the city of Vancouver, you don't really see those subdivisions. And in the city of Vancouver, that stopped in the 70s. Another important thing to know about buying a house in the city of Vancouver is that when you're looking at the square foot measurements, the total square footage will always include the basement. As long as it's over 5 feet in height, that can be included in the measurement. And because our houses are smaller and because the prices are so much more higher, everybody is using that space. Originally, those houses were built, let's say in the 20s and 30s, and that basement was not considered a livable space. It was used to store like the coal to heat the house. Often the floor was bare ground and not even concrete. But over the years, over the decades, as our city has become denser and more desirable, people have used those spaces. And now, predominantly those basements are used as income suites to help people afford living in the city. But important to know, when you're looking at square footage measurements in the city of Vancouver and the outskirts, measurements will always include the basement. And then number 9, condos. What's different about buying a condo in Vancouver? Well, one thing I think that you're probably going to notice is that condo fees are considerably lower than what you'll find in many other parts of Canada, like Calgary, like Toronto as an example. And the reason for that is essentially that condos here are not saving for all the work that they need to do. What's much more common in our market is that the strata will decide, some work needs to be done 5 years down the road. Well, we're going to charge a special assessment, basically a levy of all the owners. So that's a really important nuance difference, because in a place like Toronto, they're forced to save from the maintenance fees for that future work. That doesn't happen typically in the city of Vancouver. So if you buy a condo or a townhouse, you're definitely going to want to put a little money aside every month to save for those projects coming up in the future. Because just like buying a car, nothing lasts forever. You got to take it into the mechanic and have, the regular maintenance done that needs to happen to make sure that your investment is protected. And another big difference when you're buying a condo is that you and I are the ones who have to review the strata documents. So there's the strata minutes, there's a depreciation report, there's financial reports. And in some other markets, and I know Ontario is this way, basically what you have is you get a clearance certificate from your lawyer. And the lawyer basically looks over all that documentation and gives you the green light and says, yep, these are the things that you need to worry about. Or yeah, this strata is completely working 100% as it should. Here in BC, the lawyers don't take on that responsibility. It's your and my responsibility to do that together. And so we both review those documents and make sure that there are, no big bugaboos in there and that the strata is working as it's supposed to. Finally, number 10, in our market, the deposit is usually 5% of what you're offering, roughly. It doesn't have to be an exact dollar amount. And it is negotiable. Some sellers may not be as worried about it. Some sellers may want considerably more money. And especially if there's a long closing, they may want, 10% to 20%. Let's say if it's 6, 7, 8 months in the future that you're planning on closing. But if it's a typical closing, that's usually 1 to 2.5 months, somewhere in there, then typically 5% is what's expected. And I know in some other markets that amount is actually, could just be $1,000 no matter what the price of the property is, or it could be 2%, 3%. Our market, it's 5%. The deposit is paid only when the deal goes firm. So you usually have subject, and only when you remove those subjects will you end up having to pay the deposit. If you have no subjects, then typically you pay the deposit at that point. And so it's important to know how much it is and when you pay it, because you need to have that money available when you're seriously looking. You don't want it held up in some investments that take some time to get it out. Just be aware, 5%. Hey, if you got some value out of this video, I'd really appreciate a subscribe. Be sure to click that link down below. I do put out videos like this every single week about what it's like to live in Vancouver, what it's like to move here from my perspective, and I'd love to have you along for the ride. Be sure to check out my past videos, and there's going to be a couple links popping up soon. Really appreciate you watching this video and sticking with it right down to the end. I'll see you next week.